George, Duke of Clarence, was the younger brother of King Edward. The Duke of Clarence sided with a French invasion force against King Edward. Then he spread rumors that King Edward was illegitimate, and even that King Edward's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville was also illegitimate. For this, he was later executed.
The Duke of Clarence kidnapped Princess Anne Neville on multiple occasions. He was married to Isabel Neville, meaning he had full control of the Grand Beauchamp estates. When his brother Richard wanted to marry Anne Neville, Clarence was outraged at the prospect of sharing the estates with his brother. Before the planned marriage, he kidnapped Anne, held her in London, and disguised her as a kitchen maid. After a desperate search, she was discovered and rescued by Richard. This shows that the Duke of Clarence kidnapped Anne out of pure greed, because he refused to share the property with his brother and wanted to maintain full control over it. To prevent the wedding, he was willing to go to extreme measures, including kidnapping Anne.
Soon after Edward IV became king in March 1461, George was made Duke of Clarence, and in 1462 he was appointed by Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. However, in 1468, Clarence fell under the influence of Richard Neville, who was Earl of Warwick, a man who was slowly losing the control that he had formerly exercised over King Edward. In the rebellion against Edward, Clarence decided to marry Earl's daughter, Isabel, in July 1469. Then in March 1470, Clarence and Warwick secretly supported an armed uprising in northern England that was supposedly to be directly against Edward. When Edward discovered about their uprising, he fled to France and never returned until September. After Edward went into exile, they put the Lancastrian monarch Henry VI, who was deposed in 1461, back on the throne. However, when Edward returned in March 1471, Clarence and Edward reconciled. This was because Clarence became disappointed with Warwick's management of the government and decided to leave and fight in battles that would lead to Edward's restoration. Shortly after, this led to Duke of Clarence to be Earl of Warwick and Salisbury in 1472. Sadly, after Clarence's wife died in 1476, Clarence moved on quickly and decided to marry Mary, Duchess of Burgundy, who Edward again objected from doing so. However, once again, Clarence did not listen to his brother and went against his wishes. Edward's hatred for Clarence started to grow more and more. He started to think that Clarence was trying to obtain his throne. Therefore, Clarence was thrown into prison due to Edward. In January 1478, Edward took away the charges against Clarence and let him out of jail. Clarence had to do oaths stating allegiance to himself and his heirs. However, there were still rumors that Clarence was starting a new rebellion. Therefore, Edward decided to take action. Edward decided to kill Clarence, and he asked him how he would like to die. And Clarence said, by drowning in a barrel filled with Malmsey wine. Edward obeyed to his wishes. Therefore, Edward was responsible for the execution of the Duke of Clarence because he was afraid that Clarence was after his throne. Furthermore, Clarence in the end asked to be executed by drowning in a barrel of wine, and Edward obeyed to his wishes.